For the newly indoctrinated, Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files follows the story of a professional wizard in Chicago. We've started our podcast as a way to help break down the series' most important moments, characters, and lore. This is McAnally's Dresden Files podcast by Free Flow Rambling. Conjure by it at your own risk.
Welcome to the McAnally's Pubcast, brought to you by Free Flow Rambling. This is episode number 12, Sightseeing. My name is Tansenn, and I am joined by Maggie.
Welcome.
And Jess.
Hey.
Chapter 24. Harry drives to the lake house, managing to outspeed the coming storm. Before entering the house, Dresden uses his sight to see the house for what it is, and sees all the dark energy emanating from the house. Dresden nearly loses control of his anger, but is reminded of what it is to be a wizard. So chapter 24, Dresden manages to make it in the Trans Am without dying either by car accident or by storm.
By mortal or mystical means.
Which is
Mundane.
highly impressive.
It is, considering he says he gets the car up to 130 miles an hour at some point.
How many kilometers is that?
Like double.
Too many. 1.6.
Is it 1.6 or 1.2?
1.6.
1.6? Okay. So, yeah, that many more kilometers.
Way lots.
Yeah.
My math is shit, but I know that's fast.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah,
super
not killing
speed.
himself or anyone else on the road.
Well, yeah, and he mentions he's
In
like...
the middle of the rain, too.
He's like, thank God it's Sunday and there's not a lot of traffic. And also, I'm pretty sure it was shift change because none of the cops bothered to stop me. So thank God for that, too. Because, I mean, Justin couldn't afford a speeding ticket on the best of days, let alone at fucking like 130.
He couldn't afford the gas for the car or a cab.
Right?
In fact, I'm pretty sure if he stopped for a steak sandwich, that Mac would be like, no. We don't
Your tab is maxed.
Right. I want that car back detailed.
I was about to say, though. I was like, he steak sandwich or no car.
Yeah, right. But yeah, he like when he finally is like approaching his exit to the lake house, he, I start to slow down and just like hydroplane but he managed with like a lot more calm and cool than he felt. So good driving habit instincts.
all season
Learn them
tires.
early, people. Yeah, so does make it there. So just manage. I think once he crosses into Michigan is when he starts to outpace the storm, because he is driving through it, and it's not that long before he gets to the lake house. So somewhere around the border, or just before, just after, or something, he does manage to outstrip the storm. So he buys himself a little bit of time, because Vicky Boy needs that. And yeah, he gets there and decides he needs an edge, because he didn't really find out a lot back in like chapter 5-6 when he was originally out there to check it out. So this time he decides to go with the big guns, and he opens his sight.
Right. I want to read this chapter, or this, I almost want to read the entire chapter because I have so many quotes from it.
Time to skip to 2 times speed, people. For
Right. Okay. So I'm going to read this here. I felt as though a veil of thick cloth had been lifted away from me as I opened my eyes again. Not only from my eyes, but from all of my senses. I could abruptly smell the mud and fish odor of the lake, the trees around the house, the fresh scent of the coming rain preceding the storm on the smoke-stained wind. I looked at the trees, saw them, not just in the first green coat of spring, but in full bloom of summer, the splendor of the fall, and the barren desolation of winter, all at the same time. I saw the house, I saw each separate part of its own component, the timbers as part of spectral trees, the windows as pieces of sandy shores. I could feel the heat of summer and the cold of winter in the wind coming off the lake. I saw the house wreathed in ghostly flames, and I knew that those parts of its possible future, that fire lay down many paths of the possibility that lay ahead in the next hour. Like, what a wonderful, beautiful passage. Yeah. And there's so much packed within it.
And right followed up after it is just a few pages and pages of Jim Butcher setting the scene for this dark and scary imagery as well that comes with it. Everything that he sees with it, too.
The sight gives you, like, the present, the past, and the future all in one, all layered over, right? So... yeah, I did kind of like with the windows, like the sands of distant shore. You know, these bits of glass originally started as, you know, and
it's very
it's,
insane.
It's just a lot of juxtapositions, just many layered juxtapositions on layers.
Totally. And again, like Jim Butcher goes on for a while, just building and building and building and building. It's a significant amount of imagery goes into just describing. Because once you get through that initial part, he goes on to describe how like there's skulls everywhere, and it's covered in moss, and it's covered in dark and evil, and you can see the ghostly spirits, and you can see the lust and the greed and the sludgy, and it's everywhere, and it encompasses the entire being of the physical manifestation of the house, both for the spirit world and the physical world, and again, the past, present, and future. It's every aspect of this place is just evil and dark, but also powerful. Yeah. It is a all-encompassing place that, you know, to Harry's senses right off the bat is very much both intriguing and terrifying. Almost
an omnipresence that's to the site, like that. It just hasn't really got a bias to it. It's just that it gives you every aspect of it of what you're looking at.
Which is the main problem with it.
Yeah, he describes it as seeing things for what they really are. Like when he's talking to Monica, and Monica says Victor first came to her and gave her the 3-eye when he was first developing it. And that's Dresden's take. He's like, oh my God, I feel bad that, you know, for her to suddenly have that thrust upon her and to see her husband for who he really is, right? So you do get a sort of poetic license in how that is displayed to your senses. But essentially that's what the site is for. It's to break, and that's why he opens it here and now, because he wants to see the truth of what's going on here. He doesn't want to see the bricks and stones of the mundane mortal world, that the house is just a house. But when he opens his sight, he sees the essence, the truth. That dark magic has been brewing here for a long time. It has seeped in. It has laid roots. It is established. It's sunk into the foundation. Like
this is what Monica Sells and Linda Randall and Tommy Tom have all stared at themselves while they were on that drug, and who knows who else. This isn't.
They were. Yeah.
Harry's not the first to witness this. This has kind of been
why it's so addicting, because you get to see everything.
Yeah,
it's like the eyes of God or goddess, depending on your
on your take.
Her.
But yeah, exactly. And in this particular case, not so good, because Victor has not been doing good things with it.
Or the eyes of the devil.
Right. And that's basically what you're getting. That's the filter on this one right here. But, you know, Harry's like, it's great if you happen to look upon, you know, a good fairy or something like that, you know, a little wood sprite or something doing. He's like, it can be amazing and beautiful and heartrending, and, you know, but you look at this crap and it's mind-bending in a bad way, and it always, 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 always stays with you. This is the thing, is you can never, you know, time and memory and drugs and alcohol will never diminish this.
And more on that is that as this chapter carries on too, there's a moment where Harry has that, you know, this builds on you so much and it can be so hard to resist. Even he himself is like, there's so much power here. And he has a moment where you find out that backstory of like Harry's seen this power, had it in his near grasp before, and had to walk away before. Yeah. And there's that little bit of dark temptation with him again where he's like, it's here again. This is another chance to take it up again. And it's very much that, like, even though he knows the risks and he knows the consequences, it's still something that even he struggles to grapple with, because once it's right there, once you're in the third eye and you're looking at all of that sheer mass of everything, it's incredibly overpowering.
I think that's even his line. He's like, consequences be damned, right? So he knows, because he knows he's already on a real thin line with the council. They're already like literally breathing down his neck. They're showing up tomorrow morning to pronounce judgment on him.
Even as after he, at the end of the last chapter 223, you know, he says, he's like, I turned away, my bridge is burning behind me. And it was really, it does set up to assume that what he's got to lose now.
Yeah. Well, that's it, right? Exactly. He's like, it's right there, all in. And again, like we've talked about, Harry says himself, he's not real good at like necessarily the finesse and the fine. He's not good at really delicate, intricate work. But he's a powerhouse, and he's like, there's so much friggin' power built up here, and because, I guess maybe the nature of the dark, again, working with good forces, it's a little bit harder, it's a little bit trickier to do the right thing and to do right, but you want to, building is hard, destroying is easy.
There's a point too where you see, like, as you go on with the series, you get more and more examples of this, but I find even at the beginning you can start to see this, like, same as how, like, an asteroid, a star becomes a planet by, it gets a little bit of gravitational force and it starts to become its own magnetic force field. I find that Harry, even from the very beginning, you can find that Power is attracted to Harry as much as he's attracted to Power. And I find that it's like, it's not always Harry that goes seeking it, but it often finds him either way, and he has a big issue with turning it down,
often
for better or
in
worse.
His path, yeah.
And it's just something that even early on, and even in Stormfront, Harry, you see him basically stumbling upon great masses of power and constantly being thrown within what's too much, what's too little, what can I accept, what do I need to deny.
And again, if that's the natural course of things, or his personality, in the sense that, exactly like I say, he says it was first thrust upon him at like 16 with this mentor dangling it in front of him at the time. He's like, partially because he was young and scared, he's like, there was, I'm sure, some morality to this is wrong, but it was also a little bit of like, I don't really know, like, I'm just gonna, but exactly, the more he encounters it, so he matures and knows what can come with that, but he also knows more of the he's like, I've been having this presented to me, pushed at me, thrown in my path.
It's harder and harder to say no.
Yeah, like, why does it keep coming up? And now that...
And even as we started this book, he seemed like a grumpy, like 30, 40, 50-year-old wizard, well in his prime, done with the world. But he's really only a 25-year-old. And again, in episode 1, we spoke about the arrogance of a 25-year-old man who thinks that he's got all this. So I think even more, like when you think about a guy nearly a decade later from the first time he's turned down real power, and probably every night since then, he thought, but what if? That every time now, it's like, well, now I can surely handle it. Like, sure, it was good of me at 16 to say no, but if I had another chance again, like... And especially now with this burnt bridges in the background, and like your murder is like within the hour, and
right.
And I mean,
well, yeah,
we get to that 11th hour time and time again in the Dresden Files. Like the entire books are the 11th hour.
One of the things that I love about Dresden is that despite all of that, with all of the things that he's come across, and he's at this sort of bottom of his rope, he still is so positive. Like there's a passage that after he finishes the site, he closes it, and then he clarifies that despite the site, the future is always something that can be changed. That, quote, nobody had to die tonight. It didn't have to come to that. Not for them and not for me. It's this unending sense of positivity that comes from Dresden. That's so wonderful.
But somebody would die.
Yes and no. Because basically he's first going down that path when he sees all this power and this darkness and this inevitability, right? He's like, there's flames. He's like, somewhere in the future that's out of the infinite possibilities, the majority of them ends with this place burning to the ground, right? And he's like, I could end it right here. He's like, I can just take out Victor here and now before he even knows I'm here, before he gets a chance to get a shot off at me. And it is, but it's not Harry that pulls him back, because he's more and more considering this and like, fuck this, I'm screwed anyways. I don't want to fight anymore. I want to take the easy way. I want to cheat. And he gets that hand, right? Because he's kind of holding his amulet, and he sort of lets, the bicycle go, and is kind of starting to be like, fuck it. Yeah, let me just take the cheap shot. Let me end this right. Like, yeah, I may have to pay for it, but I'll be safe. And he feels that hand, that, mystical, ethereal, not really there, female presence, and puts the hand back on the pentacle that for him is the order, the security, his faith symbol, whatever it is that he believes in it. And again, that somewhere, is the one that his mother gave him. So presumably maybe this is his mother's sort of, whether it's a literal external force or just his own conscious manifesting as that, but it's sort of an extra that pulls him back from that he does need the reminder, and he does need to sort of, be brought back to that, to be like, oh yeah, right, this is why I don't want to take that route. And then he's like, okay, yeah, it doesn't have to go down like that, you know, like I can maybe still get out of this without cheating, without breaking the, you know.
And it says right after that passage too, whether or not you believe that it was a physical manifestation, if it was really subconscious or whatever that hand was, he follows it very quickly with magic, as we've heard through a handful of times already at this point, is that magic comes from inside. It's just a part of who you are, and what you are able to do with it is a great projection of who you are as a person. And, you know, bringing it back to, I'm not a murderer, like, I'm not, that's not why I do this, it's not who I am, and it's not where my magic comes from. And Harry being very big on the mental aspects of the manifestation of magic too. I think it was a good, you know, regardless of whether or not you think that hand was legitimate or not, at least afterwards, it is very much Harry himself who's like, okay, no, wait a second. This is defining for a whole new set of reasons, and whether or not you are safe in this, whether or not you get out of this alive, it will change you.
Yeah.
And that's not, he's willing to pay a certain price, but not that one.
Yeah. He kind of embodies that, be the change in the world you want to see, you know? He's like, he knows he so easily can take the quote-unquote easy route and just smash and bash and crush everything in his path. But he keeps stopping himself. He keeps reminding himself. He's like, that's not the person I want to be. That's not the wizard I want to be. Like, for me, it's the power of creation, not destruction. And people like Victor that use it in destructive manners goes very much, you know, his conscious moral brain is like, no. So while unconsciously the temptation is there and does its job and tempts him a lot to just take the easy way out, right? That's how Harry defines himself. He's like, ultimately, no, I don't want to be that. Even if it's the hard way, I want to do what I think is right, and I want to do as best as I can with my magic and my life and my purpose in the world.
Yeah, even further along that line, it's, you know, fuck the Wizard Council, fuck this, fuck that, fuck anyone up to this point. I really can't list anyone without spoilers at this point, but it is very much like, if I can't deal with myself, that's where I draw the line. That Harry is very much, even if he has to circle himself off from everyone else, he cares a whole lot about his own opinion of himself.
Well, and we do get to learn a little bit about the backstory in this particular chapter, about how he was tempted, we don't know by whom yet. Specifically, we'll get there.
Yes, as a child.
But he was tempted by power, and all it led to him was scorn from the White Council. But he still,
and not just scorn, like a lot deeper than.
But I think that's even more of it, is that he was tempted by the power and said no to it, and all he ever got was hell from the council. So this is like a second chance. He's like, I can fix it with this power, and I cannot have this issue. Fuck, even if the White Council doesn't forgive me, I'll at least have a chance to stand up to them.
What's amazing about it is that he still has that positivity, that he still holds on to what's right, what he needs to be doing, and that there is a possibility for something to happen that is where everybody lives.
Despite 45 minutes after breaking a chair over Morgan's back, he's like, but maybe, guys, this could all still turn around.
Kill him. I did just want to incapacitate him, but yeah.
I get everything that you're saying, but he just took a chair to a council member.
He's still young,
but
and
his moral code,
though,
his moral code is very strong for him and is his driving force. Now it's just like you say, it's his moral code. So sometimes part of the council aligns with that, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, Harry doesn't feel a whole lot of regret or remorse or hesitation in saying, yeah, fuck you guys, you're wrong. But once he has deemed something as right or wrong by his definitions and standards, then he holds to that very hard and tries to do his best to toe that line and be that person and not stray beyond it. But
and no spoilers, but as the series goes along too, you really see where that line between saying yes or no inverse to his own moral decisions, you can really see how that muddies the water as it goes on, because there becomes, I mean, early on, again, and throughout all the books, you're always with Harry. We've discussed this before. Of course, you're always rooting for Harry. You're supposed to be rooting for Harry. But as we've been going through these books, it's a little bit easier now to see why other people were like, dude, like, what the fuck? Tell me what's going on. He's like, no, I can't. Just trust me. And everyone else is like, hey, no, go fuck yourself.
But you've given us no reason to trust
Whereas
you.
we're all like, no, just trust him. Shut the fuck up. Who cares? But
Yeah,
it's a little bit easier to see like, well, no, like, again, we understand from Harry's point of view, but it's a lot easier to see that moral justification versus injustification for everyone else, because again, when you're not following anyone else's code, it's very easy to do your own A, B, and C, but it's hard for everyone else to keep up with that because they don't know what D and E and F are yet.
Yeah,
so.
what is your line? If you're willing to ignore council law for this, if you're willing to ignore civil law for this, then what does that
make a
mean,
deal with
right?
this person and that person and this person who
he
can...
is such a crack shot because he just improvs everything that he does. Like, he doesn't know what he's going to do next.
Yeah, and that's it. If you take a step back and try to look at it from a more objective, if you try and really see, okay, well, what is it that only Murphy knows? You realize, oh shit, not a lot. Like,
well,
no
and that's part of the fun
right?
of this podcast is like we're eventually going to get to the point where we try and figure out what the 3-part series finale is looking like. And, there's no idea because who the fuck knows what Harry's going to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who is he going to shake hands with in the final hour,
theory.
right?
It's, how do you predict the unpredictable?
Mm-hmm.
How do you expect the unexpected? Yeah. But
We'll get there.
but this is, Harry's little moment of inner conflict.
Well, and it's how he describes magic itself. Like, to quote the book, a man's magic demonstrates what sort of person he is, what is held most deeply inside him. We see that there's an intense duality in him, really, at this point, because there's that anger and lust for power, and the pain that he feels versus the immense positivity and the desire to do the right thing, and his father and his mother's influence and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you see that, and I love that duality that we get to experience from him. It makes him more human.
I think it's important to remember that all of what we've just spoken about is happening when he has 0 magical items on him at all. His shield bracelet is empty. He doesn't have his staff. He doesn't have his blasting rod. He's walking in there as
he's mono.
I mean,
He's
exactly
stripped
like
bare.
Other than
This is the naked Greek wrestling.
Other than his inner magical ability, he is as mortal a man as he is going to get, really, and he's still having this. Like it makes a little bit more for that power fight, that imbalance, that injustice versus this is who I really, really, truly am at my bare essentials.
Right, and in some ways it's himself versus himself, because Victor Sells is that version of himself that has a lot of power, doesn't know what to do with it, but has chosen the wrong path, whereas he himself has a lot of power, doesn't always know what to do with it because he's not that refined. He has a little bit more education than Victor Sells does, but has that sense of right and wrong.
Or the opposite, sort of, he knows what to do with it. He just doesn't quite he hasn't refined the skill enough to do what he wants with it. That's the thing. He sort of knows that he's got the juice to do it. And I mean, I think this is it. You find, like, Harry has a lot of contempt for, like, whether it's because he's a wizard and knows things, or whether it's because he's 25 and is just typical youthful arrogance, or because he's lived a hard life, in the foster system, and then with this mentor that things went sideways, but like, he's talking about the council as being like a bunch of old fools and Morgan just being their watchdog / lapdog, right? Like, he never paints them in a very good picture. He never has a lot of nice things to say. He begrudgingly, and it's always rather begrudgingly, admits that they serve a purpose, and yes, ultimately they're sort of trying. I mean, it's kind of like how a lot of us feel about government in general. You sort of in general, you suppose they're there trying to do the right thing and have the best interest of your country, but we all have gripes and problems with how the government, never pleases everybody, and it's too set in its way, and it takes too long to make change, and when it doesn't make the right changes, and yada, yada, yada down the line, right? So, like, he gets stuck on that a lot. Like, wizards live a long life, but now you've got all these long-lived wizards sitting on the council remembering the heydays of, the 1600s and the 1800s, and now we're in, 2021, and Harry's like, come on, people, 2000 is this book, but you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, he doesn't have a lot of respect for, any of that, and he has contempt for Victor in that exactly. It's like, well, you're suddenly making a grab at all this power you discovered, but you have no idea how to properly use it. and what you could do with it. And that's where Harry is, he's like, I would know what to do if I had that power. I, know how I could smite my enemies. And you're being some like penny ante little drug lord here, thinking you're, Mr. Big Britches. But, he's like, you have no idea what you can actually accomplish with magic. Mm-hmm. And, you don't have enough training like I do to know, but you don't have enough sense to do anything decent with it either. Like, a lot of contempt for things, and that's where Harry has to pull himself back and remind himself.
Humility really does draw the line, and occasionally Harry's on the wrong side of it. But in other cases too, like this one, sometimes Harry manages to pull back and be the bigger person occasionally.
Right. Well, he sees himself as a wizard, capital W. Wizards control their power. They don't let it control them. And a wizard doesn't use magic to kill people. They use it to discover, to protect, to mend, to help, not to destroy. He's very specific.
And that's what it basically comes down to.
Magic comes from creation. That is his overarching view of magic, is that it comes from creation, and that anything that goes against that one and only fact is inherently wrong of magic.
Yeah.
Well, and this is one of the things that talks him down, that he ends up dissipating his anger.
Yeah.
Knowing.
Yeah, because he's brought back to that pentacle and what that symbolizes for him. It's the order contained, all of that power and I forget how he describes it, sort of. But yeah, it contained in that circle and that.
I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because I know we're near to the end of our discussion of the chapter, but there was so many good descriptions in this book. Yeah. Or in this chapter. So many good ones. And this is one that made me think a little bit. Made me think of like, Jim, why'd you write it like that? So it's I looked on this darkling house with all of its stinking lust and fear, all of its horrid hate worm openly upon it in my sight, like a mantle of flayed human skin on the shoulders of a pretty girl with gorgeous hair, luscious lips, sunken eyes, and rotten teeth. It repulsed me, and it made me afraid. I just love how he wrote that. Love how he wrote that. But it just makes me think, why did he use the image of a pretty girl? Like,
well, Medusa was a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous young mortal woman until she was
Gorgon.
cursed by Aphrodite or Athena. One of them.
Oh, cursed.
I believe it was Athena. It was Athena who cursed Medusa because, Poseidon and Medusa were like ronking around in her temple, and she was pissed about it, so she cursed Medusa to be the Gorgon. But even in that, it became this very beautiful, very cursed ending regardless. And I think even in that sort of way, you've got this something. The house had a potential early on, and now it's been cursed. It's been darkened and tainted from outward influence on it. Like Victor's, as it said, it's the past, present, and future, and it's kind of painted to be this horrible, horrible story even before Victor got here, It's kind of like it's got bones and skulls of plenty across this place. And I don't think that could be all of Victor's doing, because he's only been at it for a few years, and for there to be the carnage that surrounds this house, you think that there has to be a dark story here already.
Maybe he was drawn to.
It might just. I think it's supposed to indicate of just how much atrocity that Victor has been spewing with his experiments.
Or perhaps attracted to it, even if it's only through the never.
Yeah, there is an element of that. You're right. It could be that Victor sort of was drawn to buying that lake house at some point, because that had all gone down in the past, even before he started. But I sort of had looked at it a little bit more before that. Yeah, that's just how gung-ho Victor's been going, just how he's been churning it out. That's not necessarily like mortal destruction and stuff too, right? Because, as we go here, he uses, animals and things as the vessel, for carrying out. So, yeah, I agree. It definitely could be the one, but I sort of had always looked at it more as that was sort of how corrupted and how fast down that dark path sort of Victor went, like, you know, just like dive in the deep end. He went whole hog. Like as soon as he started figuring it out, he never really went in a good direction, right? He was, and I mean, like when Monica's having that discussion with Harry, you know, she's like, God help me, was my husband. She's like, he wasn't always a bad man. Like he tried to work really hard and support the family. And I think because he knew I came from a wealthy place, like he really tried to give that to me. And when he couldn't, you know, like a lot of times he felt, because even before he found the magic, as I sort of, to me, what she was hinting at was that, you know, he felt like he could not always provide, just keep up the lifestyle to which she was accustomed in his eyes, right? So Monica is probably fine. Like, sure, she came from a wealthy family, but, you know, she loved Victor and would have been happy to have sort of a middle-class life with him and raise a family. But Victor always saw that bar, that not good enough, that I need to provide more. And when he wasn't as, I don't know, successful or as quickly successful as, you know, he viewed her parents or whatever the case, right? That's where she says, you know, he would get like angry and frustrated. You'll never be satisfied.
Well, and that's where he figured out when he was talking in the magical terms that that anger and frustration fueled his magic even more.
Well, yeah, that was it. Is that the second he found it, he was looking for, how do I get richer? How do I get better? How do I get ahead? You know, it was like he already had some of that and self-imposed a lot, because the impression I get from Monica is not that she was putting it on him. You know, like I say, I think she would have been happy with just a loving husband and didn't need all the bells and whistles. But Victor felt that, what's the word? That inferior complex or whatever, you know, he felt the inferiority and shame and anxiety. And I think a lot of that was sort of self-manifested, whatever. So that once when he got his hands on it, it went super dark really fast. And I think that's where a lot of it came from in and around there, is that he dove in so deep so fast that he just...
One of those hamster balls. Once it started spinning, you just couldn't get off the ride anyways.
It's, yeah. And it just got really dark really quick. And I think sort of the fact that he didn't even take his time to sort of explore and see, it was just, he got a taste and just went boom. Right. So...
Well, I could see, I just now I went back through the chapter and I realized that, it never specified that the skulls were human. So I could see in that case, if you're just, you know, you're starting on every rat and mouse and bird in the area, how quickly that could build things up to. If you're going at that pace, how quickly the bodies would add up if it's any living creature that comes anywhere close to your capabilities.
Yeah. And again, this is where we were saying earlier that the site does take a little bit of poetic license. It does, as it says, show you the truth, but it shows it as, so I mean, it could very well be a ton of human skulls hanging over the place, but just as, because we recognize that as a sign of eerie and death and destruction and badness. Of course, there's no way, but yeah.
Either way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it was, but yes, there's a lot of really good imagery in this, and you know it's bad. And Harry almost goes there for a sec and then decides, nope, I'm going to stay
Not today, Satan.
Not today. I'm going to stay on the straight and narrow and bring this guy down the good old-fashioned way, on the side of righteousness.
Okay. So that brings us to Chapter 25. Chapter 25. Harry enters the lake house and finds boxes upon boxes of the three-eyed drug, which he realizes is not a drug, but an actual potion. Dresden confronts and disrupts Victor during his spell, but is shot by one of the Beckitts. Victor releases his scorpions while Harry is trapped in the kitchen.
A lot of the premise in this chapter lays down a lot of parts for the coming books. Mm-hmm. I find that this chapter especially kind of lays the groundwork for 3 or 4 other books, which is exciting because we get to reference back to this moment. We can't really say anything now, but we can be like, remember in Stormfront, this, and this. So it's a little bit exciting because even from book 1 early on, this really laid the foundation for a lot of early on plot points. Mm-hmm. And it all boils down
It will be exciting when
we're
can
about to do.
Start getting into more of that. And because I have not delved as far into the theories and machinations of the plot and stuff like that as you. I've just read all the books numerous times and really enjoyed them, and, you know, my own bits and pieces there. So it'll be interesting to start getting into some of that and have further discussions on, ooh, that's really good. That or I think people are really stretching and you just back read that into meaning that.
There's a lot of that.
There is a lot of that, but that's why it will be fun to get to that. And like you say, right, be like, oh, this totally relates back to, and be like, I don't know if that's really what they meant at the time, but okay, I guess if you squint, you can make that work. But yes, it will get exciting on. But yes, you're right. This is the beginning of the end, the beginning of the start.
Yes.
The end of the start?
Well, it's the end of the beginning, but the beginning of the further end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
with hindsight 2020, it's the beginning.
Yeah. It's
2021.
it's like the bait and switch. And you get to really go back and be like, oh, fuck. Even that moment with the hand, or even early on with Susan, is like, there's a lot in the books in Stormfront that really sets it up that I think, again, brings a level of
Full circle.
legitimacy to the series, that it's not like there's clear planning, it's not like, oh shit, we gotta come up with some way to fix this plot hole 12 books later, like I find that right from the start there seemed to be a legitimate plot and direction that was taken, and it's very fun going through Stormfront again because you get to see some of those moments that do not present themselves for a while.
Yeah.
But in this chapter especially, you get a lot of those moments.
And like you say, speculate on which parts were like legitimate and which parts are just like retconned.
Which, I mean, even to now, you can't necessarily say, even though are all caught up on Battleground, even some of these moments are like, but wait, because it still isn't settled,
Did he? Did he not? Did it? Ooh.
Like, you waited so long for peace talks in Battleground to settle so many questions, and all it did was give more. And I'm like, okay, so we still don't know anything.
Damn
Great.
you,
More
Butcher!
predictions. Yeah.
That's a sign of a good author.
yet
Just
still
keeps
enjoyable.
you
I'm
reading.
gonna say, I was like, like the whole Fault in Our Stars sort of aspect thing, where it's like the book didn't have a legitimate ending because cancer just kills you sometimes and you don't get a proper ending. So the Fault in Our Stars just ends at one point. And so I think, like, what if he just does that to us? Like, Jim, like Dresden just gets killed, and it's like, there you go, story's done, and nothing gets answered or put to rest.
Do not listen, Butcher. Do not do that.
Yes, no, please. Please give us resolution.
Yes, please.
Sorry, the dude died. What am I gonna do?
Scratch it out in his blood for the last chapter. Wait, must finish diary.
I know, like, you feel like at that point enough people have met him. It's like, please, everyone. But hey. So, Harry, it's almost sad. He starts off and he's like, that image of the house will never leave me. Mm-hmm. And it is sad because the sight comes up and up and up again and again and again throughout the book. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But it's important to remember that none of these moments fall in the way of any of the others. Each and every time you see through the sight, that's with you, as real as any other image with the sight, as real as any image you are seeing and perceiving at this exact moment.
Yeah.
So
never fade.
everything we
never
just spoke about,
dilutes,
that's
never
forever.
Twists and morphs. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's pretty heavy.
yeah, and I mean, again, we just had this whole talk about this power imbalance when he looked upon that scene, and that temptation is kind of going to always be there forever now in that exact form.
That's true
That
too.
will be there forever from now until Battleground,
Yeah.
and
Beyond.
however much longer he lives after that.
He makes me think that wizards have one hell of an immense memory, because if they're stuck with all of the third eye visions that they have, they must be, if they didn't have an amazing memory, they'd be babbling idiots.
And that's part of the discipline, is like not using it, because it can answer a hell of a lot of your questions right from the start. But otherwise
At a
you
cost.
end up with a fuck ton of memories just plaguing you. And it's been said before, if you don't know how to use the site, or you don't know when to stop the site, or you use it too often, exactly, you become a bubbling mess.
It
So a lot of
will
the time,
drive you mad. Yeah.
a lot of wizards are like, look, we could just look at this right off the bat, but if we do that every single time, then it's going to be real quick,
We
you know?
can cut straight to the chase and figure out the answer every time, but what is the price?
Exactly, and I mean,
we're going to end up in a padded room in like 5 years.
and you think like,
We got like 500 to go.
as this will come up with as later books go on, a lot of the time wizards or other supernatural creatures are like telling Harry to slow down, like, you've done more in your life in 5 years than any of us have done in 500. That's insane. Sit the fuck down and stop. But even to a regular wizard that's not living the life that Harry is, to a point, I mean, if you use your third eye once a month for a decade, that is 120 times, 120 images that are there permanently forever, like that would be an insane amount. Because like
That would be my math skill is gone.
well, I've been alive for 24 years and I've barely got the last week memorized. Like, I'm not recalling anything in perfect detail. And if I was, I think I would be crazy. And that's, nothing to a 500-year lifespan. So it is a little bit, and it's not that Harry uses his eyesight all the time. He himself is also disciplined about this. He tends to make a point that when he does it, it is a last resort.
Most of the time,
More or less speaking, he has his reasons when he does use it. It's not every single book, every single situation he's pulling it up.
But it is sometimes for very brief glances like this. He sort of did seem to take a whole good look around the property and take it in. Sometimes he seems to sort of flash a bit more so he can just see what he needs to, but without taking in too much.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of his point. Like the detriment of
The third eye drug.
Of the drug is that exactly is
you're not turning it off. You're waiting for this high to leave you, and whatever you see,
Victor's not giving anyone a choice. Yeah, they're not prepared, right? They don't know what's going to come. They don't know how to deal with it when it does. They have no choice in turning it off. And exactly, right? So like you say, when you come across the pixie in the park, man, that's the best high you'll ever have. And you got no problem spending 3 hours living in that bliss and tranquility.
But you find yourself at Victor's
house and
motherfucker's gonna lose it.
You're going on a killing spree, you're jumping in the lake and right? Like, that's the thing, is that exactly it takes away.
Even Monica Sells saying that the atrocities that she saw, she still wanted more.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, is that a lot of this, and this is where Harry comes into, before, and like his problems with Victor when he's like, I went to school. Like, it's not just about learning how to be flashy and cool and stuff like that, but it's learning, like, with great power comes great responsibility and all that.
Right.
Even on in early books, like, again, like, he's really good at laying the groundwork, and you can point out from book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 how it's relevant in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But I still feel like the first few books ended a little bit more. And now the books don't end. It's like, from like book like 7 to 17, it's like all one long.
Welcome to Harry's life.
I know. It's seriously, it's like, even like, like.
The books are chapters. They really are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chapters in his life.
Chapter 17, or chapter 15, chapter 16, chapter 17. They just have to be a book long.
And sub-chapter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's harsh.
So, Harry, shakes off this magical vision and walks towards the house and realizes that there's no traps, which shows the inexperience of Victor.
Or the arrogance.
Yes, that's...
Because he really doesn't think Harry's all that shit.
Sure, he'll be dead in 20 minutes.
Yeah, he totally thinks he's a badass, totally thinks he has the upper hand, totally thinks, like,
who's living in the schoolhouse, eh?
Just because you're... Yeah, exactly. So whether he's just inexperienced to not know or think of laying magical booby traps, or whether he's just got his head too far up his ass to worry he has... Yeah, which is mostly why Harry popped the site in the first place. It wasn't really to... He sort of figured this was a place of bad juju, but basically exactly he didn't want to be surprised by anything. And yeah, there's nothing laying in wait for him that way. So he drops the sight. And
well, right before he drops the sight, he kind of uses his like x-ray vision. Like, the spell casting is like so pungent on Victor that he's like, everyone's upstairs, cool, done.
Yeah.
Like, hey, wait a second. But he does get that quick, like, and takes the moment to go through the bottom, and he drops,
you can see like the aura and essence of people, so I guess that's kind of what
it does. It checks out, yes.
Yeah.
But he uses good old PI sense and walks in and hears the sound of music and the sound of sighs from somewhere. Manages to go into the living room.
It's called setting a scene.
And figures out that they're upstairs and that the music is downstairs. So it's...
Yeah, and he shuts off the music. No ambiance tonight.
Shuts it off with a big fireball.
Yeah. Snoops around a bit first before he gives away. Like, I kind of like it like that. He's like, at first I made sure to stay like far away from the stereo so I wouldn't fuck it up with my magic. And then when he decides to announce his presence, what he does is blow up the fucking...
And then, levitates himself to the next floor
I
landing,
know.
too. It's like a dramatic bitch.
Right? My coat billowing like Batman's cape.
Which he never does again. He never levitates himself throughout the series again. So it's very funny that just in this moment he's okay.
But yeah,
Levitates himself to the second
finds
floor.
like this big massive, and I mean it's kind of like he's got like absinthe and stuff, which is great. I've never tried this stuff, but presumably it's. But then he's got like freaking like ammonia and stuff. I'm like, this is not what I want to drink.
Peyote, like
well, even that is at least an ingestible substance, but
Well, he's got a number of different ones. So absinthe, ammonia, peyote, alum, antifreeze, and other nefarious items.
yeah. So like the alum and the antifreeze and the ammonia are just like.
Right?
we
Wow, talk
got
about not knowing what your stuff is cut with. Like,
we got a really early like
Why don't you just, shoot some Drano?
yeah fuck. But that's the thing though is that we got this early on potion making 101 with Harry early on, and there is not always consumable items that go into it.
Well,
that's not
that's
the point.
right. That's
You're
true,
looking
that's
for
fair. You're-
spirit, body, taste, imagery. It's not really about what does the FDA approve for smoothies, It's more about
fair. That's true. I
the
suppose.
energy and intent behind the ingredient more than the ingredient
Yes,
itself.
once you've infused
What
it
is
with
it? The
magic, it might
seven- or
change the
s-
composition.
Or the five senses.
You have the 5 senses, the mind, and the body, so it's 7 ingredients.
Okay.
Maybe 8 with spirit.
8.
Which I really doubt that Victor knows that it has to be 7 ingredients. So these are probably really incomplete potions at that.
Yes and no, but
Well,
it
no, 'cause
is
he has
determined that
found it-
he has legitimate spell books that were given to him by legitimate sources. It's a little bit still shaky on who those sources are, and we will get to that in a few books.
But remember, it does say, because remember we said Billy's got to be, because we figured Jenny was around 12 or 13, and he said Billy was like a year or 2 younger, right? So I'm guessing he's in that 9 to 11 range or whatever, and she said that Victor discovered the magic when Billy was about 4.
Right.
So we're
he's been
talking
building
like
up to this
5
for
to
a
7
while.
years kind of a thing, right? So yeah, he
I just got
probably...
the impression, though, that he was inexperienced due to what the...
He has no formal
Dresden
training from a
had said.
teacher, but he has, and as we'll get around to other stories too, there are magical occult places within the city that are legitimate. You have to weed them out from the
It's like
others.
It's
but
like in Buffy. There's a magic shop to go to, and if you're, Susie in high school, you go there to buy your
Crystals
sage
and-
and your crystals and your tarot decks, and and if
Susie
you're
says
Buffy
tarot.
yeah, Monica, tarot cards. Like you almost played it a little bit too subtly there, Monica. Like whisked through Dresden's nuts. But anyways, but if you're like Buffy or Giles or Willow, you're going there and you're asking for the Orb of Thessaly, which actually was a Jenny, and not just for a paperweight. Jenny Calendar asked for the Orb of
Anyways.
Thessaly. It's a whole thing. But anyways, yeah. So exactly. So it's like it caters to if you don't really know, there's your lightweight whatever, and then for those that know what is going on and how to access it. So. And again, it could be sort of like a little bit of an exponential thing. Like he could have had a really slow learning curve to begin with while he first started sort of scrambling around. And then once he finally hit on, okay, this is the shit and how you do it, the last couple of years could have been a lot more intense for his legitimate knowledge and practice and stuff like that, right? So, yeah, I sort of get the impression that the drug hasn't been around for that long. But like I say, where he started dabbling, or it was more.
and again, like he figured
more
out like
back
anger
bur-
worked better than lust. But even before the lust, it was much the learning curve. So we've only got about a year or 2 of him being
Well, he only lost
a
his-
legitimate practitioner when he lost his job and had the time to dedicate.
Yeah,
full
because
time.
I was going to say it's just in the last couple of years that he lost the job. So exactly, it could have been a lot more back burner hobbyist before, and then without a job to keep him busy, and with the feeling of failure and stuff like that. With that, is like I say, where he's really poured it on in the last couple.
So anyways, Harry drag races himself up to the Lex Landing. And Very early on, I mean, very, suave, snooty behavior. He chucks a film canister in the middle of this foray, and it's very dramatic and sassy. And
I know, it's right. Victor's he's got the sharpened spoon ready to come down. Harry's about to, and he's like, I got a film canister. He's like,
that's my magic bullet.
Yeah.
An empty piece of plastic. Ha ha!
It wasn't particularly spectacular, but it was a real physical object thrown by a real physical person, and thankfully that's all I need to fuck up the circle. But yeah, like you say, he comes in all dramatic and happen and swish, and then it's like, boo. Yeah.
Well, he does manage to, Victor, tries to throw a fire spell at him, and Harry throws a wall spell up that protects himself.
Shield spell. Yes.
A shield.
Yeah, not as energy efficient.
No,
or
especially
as directed as he would normally like or be able to do with his bracelet. But he still manages to get something in the way of him.
But again, he kind of wins himself real early on. I mean, fireball to the radio, levitate to the platform, shield from the fireball, and without any of his shit on him, is pretty much
Harry's
okay.
Harry blows his wad pretty early in the orgy, is what you're saying.
Well, hey, and he kind of has to figure this out later on in books as it goes on, but
pace yourself. It's all about pacing.
For real. But book one, he goes back to the basics and, kicking and punching, because that's about all he's got the energy left to do.
Well, and he was really lucky because in the last couple of chapters, he tried to use a wind spell with the elevator and blew it through almost nearly the ceiling. So the 12 stories.
True, yeah, and then he levitates himself 2 hours later. This went perfectly fine earlier.
I got it this time. I got it. No, I'm good.
I know what I did wrong last time. Watch this.
That's called learning on the job.
Right? It's called adapting and on the fly. Fast on your feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gets a hit in on Victor.
Yeah, he resorts to physical
because he's fucking out of magic now.
It's a little. Literally fucked himself. It's a little bit of both with Harry. Part of it is I'm out of magic. Part of it is they never expect, right? Mm-hmm. Again, it's kind of like with Susan and the perfume. They never expect I'm going to smell her perfume and know it's her.
The Inquisition,
it's the Spanish Inquisition. Right, that it must have been something mystical that he identified her. And same thing, right? He's Victor's just expecting this to be nothing but a full-out magical brawl the whole way, and Harry's I'm just gonna fucking run up and punch him. They never see that coming. I don't know why, but they never see that coming. So it's one of his, it becomes a go-to.
But listen, as someone who has zero magic and can't fully understand, I feel like so many of these people are so punchable. I get it.
Right?
Yes. And I feel like people would have more catharsis if they just got to hit Harry, too. This nonstop throwing spells cannot feel as gratifying as a good solid hit could,
Whack upside the head.
Unfortunately, what he didn't think of is the Becketts, who are also non-magical, who had a gun.
And who have already been established to be pro-Victor.
Right?
It's not like these are they're just some kids off the street Victor's been putting and they're going to be too scared. No, these are active people who want Victor to help
his backers, his investors.
Fix his kids, and Harry's no. As proven in this book many times before, instantly decide who your villain is and give no thought to anyone else.
It's Donnie Wise all over again.
I've had this complaint 2 or 3 times in this book now. He completely no, I will acquit you right off the bat and move on to the rest of my shit.
I don't think he's acquitting the Becketts at all. I think
but he consistently
foolishly forgets about them. He gets, again, while he's busy mocking Victor and how Victor's focused just on magic.
Fuck the Muggles.
He completely forgets about, these other 2 people.
And how much earlier was he saying how effective a gun was? And Harry gets shot in the hip.
And Harry gets shot in the hip. Yeah. Yeah.
So he hides in the kitchen.
So he manages to, duck behind a
Is the kitchen upstairs, or does he fall down the stairs?
No, it's upstairs.
Okay.
So they're in a kitchen dining room sort of area is where
out of this lake house.
Well, he describes it. So if you want to go back and read the chapter,
I didn't read it. I didn't read the chapter.
So you've got this den living room on like, I don't know, the main floor front door, because he comes in the front door. And then on a raised level, like overlooking that, is where like this kitchen dining room area is, and that's where the deck is off of. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so it's like a deck up on big legs. That's where we found like the canister under there, and that's when Donnie was up on the deck looking through the kitchen windows taking pictures.
I feel like I'm there. Just describe the skulls now.
Yeah. So right over top of the house, there's this big, giant human skull and a kind of purple, sickly, sort of oozy, dripping kind of.
With little tiny
and there's
skulls
like
all over
slime running down
I've been
the
to this haunted
walls.
So anyways, he ducks behind the kitchen.
So the
kitchen.
island, it's like an island in the kitchen or something like that is what he's
I've seen this
counter.
cartoon where everyone runs around the island and nobody does anything.
Yes. Well, Harry does something.
So he takes a bone tube and summons the remaining of his scorpions, which traps him in the kitchen.
Yeah, shakes out a bunch more of these little bastards and sends them over.
A gross thing to collect.
A gross thing to
nasty,
collect, yeah. And so Harry's got these scorpions coming at him that he, from experience, knows are just going to keep getting bigger and nastier. But I like this when he like jumps and like dives behind the island counter or whatever. He knocks the broom and like whacks himself on the head with it, right? Which at first you think is just kind of a haha funny Harry typical, but Harry's like, oh no, wait, I can use this, and he Fantasia's Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey Mouse's himself up.
Oh, too soon. That's next chapter.
Yeah.
Did I jump ahead?
You jumped ahead.
But we're talking about the scorpions.
Yeah,
They're not there,
and we
Mom.
leave it at the scorpions.
So go back
So,
a few paces to what Mom was saying, but basically he's ducked behind this
kitchen island
kitchen
counter.
island and the bone tube. You can keep your part. But he wraps it up pretty quickly. I mean, you've got two crazy naked Becketts with guns. You've got Victor Sells making his getaway. There's massive storm above. Scorpions everywhere that are only about to get worse. And Harry right at the center of it all. I think his exact wording is like, it's a shit night for the home team. It's not looking good for the home
The
team.
quarterback. Yeah, so that was it, because he gets shot in the hip. And he crab walks backward into the kitchen, dragging his leg, because that's not responding well since he got shot in the hip.
Weird.
Right? So here he is hiding out. So he's got a room full of a deadly drug, one evil sorcerer on his home turf, two crazies with guns, one storm of wild magic looking for something to set it into explosive motion, and half a dozen scorpions like the one I had barely survived earlier, rapidly growing to movie monster size. Less than a minute on the clock and no timeouts remaining for the quarterback. All in all, it was looking like a bad evening for the home team.
This concludes our episode 12 sightseeing. Thank you for listening. You can find us online at freeflowrambling.com and McAnally's.ca. There we have links to our other podcasts, social media, and other fun tidbits. Please subscribe if you like what you're hearing, and please consider supporting us through Patreon to keep magic alive and to see more content. We are Free Flow Rambling. Conjure at it by your own risk.